Winter afternoon, a day without a sunrise. Under a moon that had not set for 6 days, I stand on the frozen ocean 20 miles off Cape Mammon, Mackenzie King Island. The sea ice of Hazen Strait is not completely featureless, but its surface does not show either any evidence of severe torture, such as one would find, for example, in the Lincoln Sea. The currents are relatively calm here. During the 9 or 10 months the water is frozen, this platform hardly moves. To the south, I can see a thin streak of violet and cobalt sky stretching across 80 degrees of the horizon. But the ice and snow barely reflect these colors. The pervasive light here is the milky blue of the reflected moon. It is possible to see 2 or 3 miles in the moonlight, but the pale light gives nothing an edge. Except for the horizon to the south, the color of a bruise, the world is only moonlit ice and black sky. The sky has no depth because of the fullness of the moon, but stars shine brightly. The stars have caused me to pause in the middle of my walk. Polaris, the North Star, is directly overhead. Whenever before I have located the Big Dipper in the sky and followed the imaginary line through its indicator stars to find Polaris, I have been looking to the north into a northern sky. This afternoon I look straight up. It is a celestial accident that Polaris is located over the Earth's geographic North Pole. There is no comparable South Pole star. It seems to sit precisely on an extension of the Earth's axis. And it has shifted its position so little in our time, we think of it as a constant. It nearly is. It has been steady enough to anchor routes of navigation for people in the Northern Hemisphere for as long as history records. Astronomers call the mathematical point in the sky above the North Pole the North Celestial Pole, and Polaris is within a degree of it. I look straight up at that anchor now, a yellowish star 100 times the size of the sun, Alpha Ursae Minoris, the only one that never seems to move. Pivoting around it are the 7 bright stars and 7 fainter ones that can be joined to create the familiar cup with its handle, or to form the hips and tail of Ursa Major, the Great Bear. In the early history of Western civilization, the parts of the world that lay to the far north were understood to lie beneath these stars. The Greeks called the whole of the region Arcticos, the country of the Great Bear. The Old World regarded the Arctic as an inaccessible place. Beyond a certain gloomy and hostile border country, however, they did not imagine it as inhospitable. Indeed, in Greek myth, this most distant part of the Arctic was a country of rich lacustrine soils, soft azure skies, gentle breezes, zephyrs, fecund animals, and trees that bore fruit, even in winter. A region farther north than the birthplace of the north wind, Boreas. The inhabitants of Hyperborea, as it was called, were thought to be the oldest of the human races, and to be comparable themselves with the land, compassionate in temperament, knowing no want, of a contemplative bent. In some legends of Hyperborea, there are striking images of this blessed atmosphere. White feathers falling from the sky, for example. The allusion is probably to a gentle lamellation of snow, but the reference is not entirely metaphorical. On the coast of Alaska one summer day, an immense flock of molting ducks flew over my head, and hundreds of their feathers rocked quietly to earth as they passed. In histories of 19th-century Arctic exploration, too, one finds a correspondence with descriptions of a kind of hoarfrost that built up like a veining of feathers on a ship's rigging. Perhaps some traveler's story of Irenic northern summers reached the Greeks and convinced them of the Hyperboreans' salutary existence. A darker side of this distant landscape, however, was more frequently evoked. The indigenous southern cultures regarded it as a wasteland of frozen mountains, of violent winds and incipient evil. For theological writers in the 7th century, it was a place of spiritual havoc, the abode of the Antichrist. During the time when the southern cultures in Europe were threatened by Goths, Vandals, and other northern tribes, including, later, the Vikings, two quintessentially malevolent figures from the Old Testament, Gog and Magog, emerged as the figurative leaders of a mythic horde poised above the civilized nations. These were the forces of darkness, arrayed against the forces of light. In English legend, the northern armies are defeated and Gog and Magog captured and taken to London in chains. Their effigies stood outside Guildhall in the central city for 500 years before being destroyed in an air raid in World War II.